threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran with Operation Epic Fury. Is that a great name? Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won.
Yeah, but have we won? I think that there's a war still going on. As a matter of fact, overnight, some of the video you're seeing right now, that is from the area in and around the Persian Gulf. And the Iranian side, the so-called terrorist regime, if President Trump notes it, is definitely still quite viable. And as a matter of fact, this what happened overnight really is starting to show that this war is coming down to right now. It's all about the Persian Gulf, specifically the Strait of Hormuz and the oil and everything else that flows out of it. Right now, this war will be won or lost based on who has control of the Straits of Hormuz. Can the Iranians hold on to it, or can the United States force it open by whatever means, diplomatic or military? And so far, the Iranian side has firm control of it, and we are unable to open it by any means thus far. And that is having significant implications. In fact, let me just show you. This is a live shot right now of the price of oil, and you see that it has shot up. Now it's at $95 a barrel. And you can see from this graphic right here, this right here is where the war, I think this was the day before the war started. And then from that point forward, you see this rise. There was a big spike up. It got at one point over $100. But then you see this drop here because Trump then told everybody, hey, you know what? This war is going to be over pretty soon. We're about got it wrapped up. And then it became pretty clear very shortly that he didn't have anything wrapped up. And then now you see the price going back up as reality is starting to creep in. People are starting to recognize that, okay, this is a real problem. And that's going to continue to be the case here. I want to give you a real quick update on exactly what's going on here. So President Trump's talking about, our epic fury. That's our operation to destroy Iran, to destroy their nuclear capacity, to destroy their Navy, everything. The reason why the Navy was so important, by the way, and why that was included as part of the objectives is for exactly what you're seeing on the screen right there. The intent is that we have to deprive them of the capacity to have any influence or any threat to stop the Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. The long-range missile issue was raised, and that was put as an objective because that is required to prevent Iran from doing what it's doing right now, which is attacking many of the countries in the region, not the least of which is Israel. So those are all the key things, and everything centers on taking out the government, because the government is the one that's giving the orders for this, and then the IRGC. They're also a sub-target. So you see that there is a very expansive target list from the United States, and an expansive objective list. If you don't take out all of these capabilities, then you're not going to force the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and that chart that I showed you about the oil will keep going north. And that has profound implications for the American economy and everything else. But last night, the claim is, by the way, one of the reasons why you had that little dip there a few days ago is because President Trump, this war is all but won. We've basically won it. You saw that opening there where he says we've won. Well, if we've won, then you're thinking, wouldn't we have seen at least a reduction in the capacity of the Iranian side so far? Because we've seen all this imagery for all that dramatic stuff we just showed you from overnight in the Gulf. In the last few days, there's been equally dramatic stuff on the ground in Tehran. Over the weekend, it was turned into an apocalyptic scene of fire running down into the city streets, of the airport just being absolutely engulfed, of these oil depots in Tehran being all burned up, and in this black clouds literally blocking the sun out, making it look like night in the middle of day, putting toxic fumes there, all this stuff going on. And yet, for all that, if Epic Fury is the name of our American operation, Iran's is called True Promise 4. They just keep reiterating. Every time we attack or Israel attacks, they just add another number to it. Well, since this one started, they launched last night their 37th wave of attacks. 37. You don't hear that much in the Western media because that shows the viability of the government. That shows that we are not winning. By definition, their capacity continues on. Some important points to note out. Last night's shot alone, the 37th round, lasted 3 hours in duration. There was attacks in the Gulf, against Israel, against U.S. bases at Bahrain, among several other things. So they're still hitting our facilities there. They're not finished there yet. Obviously, the Persian Gulf. The missiles, according to the Iranian side, they say that right now they're still working through their inventories that were produced in the 2012 to 2014 timeframe. They said the newer stuff that they've been producing, they haven't even used yet. They haven't even gotten into that. And of course, as you may know, they have all their facilities because of the history and because of our capacity. They moved them underground quite a long time ago. So they're not subject to being blown up. So all these graphic images you see of buildings blowing up and oil facilities, etc., the production facilities for the drones and for the missiles is all being done underground. And one can only presume that other production and manufacturing of things necessary for the state to continue functioning and to try to keep the country afloat economically, those are probably also scattered underground. We don't have any information on those right now, but it's reasonable to presume that they do, since they have made that a normal part of their operations. So we haven't knocked that stuff out yet. And then that leads us to what is the real operation here? If I'm saying right now, the fight in the Persian Gulf right now, whether that's air, land, and sea, all of these are going to play a role in it. Everything depends on what happens in the Gulf. Everything that happens in the Gulf depends on what happens politically in Tehran or wherever they are now, because apparently they've moved elsewhere. What we have, though, is defiance from the Iranian side. So overnight, first of all, there was the first speech, or the first words at least, attributed to the new supreme leader of Mojtaba Khamenei, who said, "We are not going to give up anything. We are not surrendering. We are going to continue on. We're going to get revenge for the blood of our children that was killed, for our leaders that were killed, for the martyrs that have already died, etc." He said, "We are not stopping. We're continuing to go on." Also, last night, the president, Pezeshkian, said, "Hey, we're not interested in going back to any kind of negotiations like that you've already sabotaged twice." And he said, "Gary, if you could put that full screen up." This is from the X account from the president himself. He said, "Talking to the leaders of Russia and Pakistan, I reaffirmed Iran's commitment to peace in the region. The only way to end this war, ignited by the Zionist regime in the U.S., is to recognize Iran's legitimate rights, payment of reparations, and firm international guarantees against future aggression." So what he's saying there is that we have no intention whatsoever of capitulating to anything. So when President Trump said this war is nearly over, we've about got him where we want him, we've destroyed X, Y, and Z, and all this stuff that he said, those things don't matter unless they're able to cumulatively pressure him into giving in. But you see that at now day 13, he is as firm and rigid as you can get, both the supreme leader and the president. They're on a unified front here. Foreign Minister Arakchi, of course, is in line with all that as well. And they are signaling nothing but resolve. Militarily, they're signaling significant retained capacity. Evidence suggests that they can maintain this for a long time. One of their ROGC generals a couple of days ago had a fiery speech in which he said, "We can go on like this for 10 years. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's just hyperbole. Maybe that's just trying to beat your chest and say things or scare the other side. I can't say. But what I think is reasonable is to assume that because they are smart and because they have seen how we operate and they know our power, that they do have capacity in these underground facilities and scattered throughout the country, the ability to maintain solvency and to maintain the capacity to fight back." And so far, through 13 days, that's exactly what we've seen. Well, listen, like I said, this is all going to come down to the Persian Gulf here, because this is where 20% of the global petroleum comes through. And as Larry Johnson pointed out on our show yesterday, 35% of all the urea in the world comes through the Strait of Hormuz. That is maybe more important than even the petroleum products that come through, because that gets to global agriculture. That is really important. It's not very sexy. No, people don't think about that. Urea doesn't even sound cool. I mean, you can't put urea in your gas tank, so we only think about that. But you should think about the urea because that has to do with the food you put in your mouth. So that tells you that 35% of all the urea, which is put in the resources that go into making agriculture with fertilizers, etc., that's what the urea produces. For global agriculture around the world, which is the only way that you can feed the amount of people we feed in the world, is to have enough urea, which comes from all the sources globally. If more than a third of it comes from this, and now then that's also been blocked, that is going to have long-term implications if it doesn't get shut, if it doesn't get opened up. So there is more pressure on President Trump, not just from the oil, not just from his own domestic case, but from people around the world who are in desperate need of that kind of stuff, because a lot of it has to do with getting there in time to have crops planted and all that kind of thing. That's so important here, but that tells you just how important this area is. But the question is, does the United States recognize this? Do we recognize that we're in a real problem here and that our assets so far have not been able to open it? Because President Trump wanted this open day one. And that when the Iranian IRGC said that it's closed and we're going to shut this thing down, then the issue was, all right, what are we going to do to get it open with? And obviously, we've got all this firepower. We've got all this naval power, air power, sea-based or land-based power that can be projected into the Gulf. And yet, so far, the Navy hasn't done it. President Trump said we're going to escort vessels through. You remember that? We talked about that in the Truth Social early on. Hasn't materialized. He said, well, we're going to provide insurance. Well, nobody's going to insurance doesn't do any good if your boat's at the bottom of the sea. Insurance is only in case something bad happens, but you hope it doesn't. But if the likelihood is your ship's going to the bottom of the Persian Gulf, and then all of the economic catastrophe go along with that, and as you saw from these images Gary keeps showing, that's already the case. There's already tremendous amounts of ecological damage, and we're not even finished yet. So God only knows how bad this is going to be. That's something that's already going to have to be determined or dealt with for a long time to come. But the question right now is, what are we going to do? If militarily, with all of this, a third of our Navy is hauled in this region, and we haven't even taken action to try and force this thing open yet, the question's going to be, why not? And does that mean that we're recognizing there is a limit to our power, and therefore we should change our objectives, change our negotiating strategy, something to get this thing open with? Well, if you listen to the president's allies on Western media in the last 12 or so hours, answer is probably not very encouraging. Here is Chris Wright, the energy secretary to the Trump administration, talking about how, no, we're in good shape.
Can the United States declare victory, success, without the Strait of Hormuz being reopened?
No, the Straits of Hormuz needs to be and will be reopened. The U.S. military is there to solve a long-term problem, which is Iran's had 47 years an ability to threaten the Straits of Hormuz. And not long from now, Iran would have nuclear arms and a massive missile program surrounding that. This was a can that could not be kicked down the road one more administration. We need to defang, and we are defanging Iran's abilities to threaten American troops in the areas, its allies, its neighbors, and global energy markets. So, yes, you've got to go through short-term pain to solve a long-term problem.
Yeah, the only long-term problem is our foolishness and our unwillingness to deal with reality as it is, and instead try to create one where there wasn't one. And he's talking about kicking a can down the road. The only reason there's a can at all is because we have put it in the ground. There wasn't a can to kick down the road. The idea that if Trump didn't attack here, which they're claiming, and otherwise we'd have been attacked, of course, is nonsensical. There is zero evidence of that, and there's overwhelming evidence to the contrary that they would never have attacked us. This is something that is so important to understand here. The only reason why the Gulf of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, is shut down and that the global oil traffic has been stopped is only because we chose to attack. We have a war of choice that we launched, and now then there is all this problem. And then as a result of that foolish decision, as I said, Iran, if we had not kicked the can at all, much less down the road, then Iran would never have shut the Strait of Hormuz. That's been an issue for 47 years. They've always said they could do it under certain circumstances, but they never had. And there's a reason why they never had. That's their lifeblood. They need that to be able to function. They need that to be able to sustain their state. So they're never going to choose to cut off their own economic income. But now that we have chosen the war, now that nearly the only thing left to them that gives them leverage over the most powerful military on the planet, according to President Trump, is the oil flow. And so now we gave them every incentive, if not the outright compulsion, to say you must close the Strait of Hormuz. That's the only leverage you have over us. If it wasn't for that, then they would be sitting in their bunkers, they would be sitting in their buildings, and all they would be doing is receiving relentless bombardment. They would be shooting some things out, but they couldn't do anything. They wouldn't have any leverage, and the problem set for us would be less. But because of this, there's a time element, time constraint. So we are in a bad position because we put ourselves in this bad position. That's the truth of it. Don't listen to any of this nonsense about we had to do this, they were coming after us if we didn't, and we're going to get rid of this evil empire and all this nonsense. That's complete garbage. That is made up, that's manufactured to try and justify a bad decision, something we shouldn't have done, to try to make it sound good. But the evidence is right there for all to see. The reality is unmistakable. But that doesn't seem to be making the U.S. bend, at least not so far. We'll see how long before especially if the price ticks up over 100 and then just keeps going up. And of course, oil always does. It's not ever a smooth line. But if the trend keeps going up and it doesn't come down because that strait doesn't open up, we're going to be in a world of hurt. Well, on CNN last night, Scott Jennings, who is, of course, an advocate, for those who may not know, for the administration, definitely loves the Trump administration, said this.
You think he's looking for an off-ramp to end this war?
Sure. I mean, you're looking for the moment where you can tell the American people we met our objectives. No nukes, no missiles, no aggressive Navy, no exporting of terrorism. And if you can tell the American people that we've achieved those objectives, we've taken out all the targets, we've degraded these people and their ability to continue to wage war on Western civilization, you want that moment to come as soon as possible. But my advice would be, do not stop short, because you don't want in 3 months these people popping up again, continuing to do the things that we didn't like that caused us to go in there in the first place.
Okay, if your objective is to do something that don't stop short, because we don't want these people popping up in the future doing something we don't want them to, that is one of your big problems. You don't go to war because somebody does something you don't like. Were they stopping the flow of oil for 47 years prior to this? The answer is no. Were they attacking the United States or Israel or any other country in the region? Any other country prior to this? No. What they had done is respond. When they had been attacked, they respond. When their leaders were assassinated, they responded. When their embassies were destroyed, they responded. At no point did they initiate launch anything against us. Even in one of the biggest areas where there's allegations that the Iranians attacked us, killed Americans during the Operation Iraqi Freedom, during the insurgency portion of that, where they provided lethal supplies to the insurgents in Iraq. That's because we were killing the Sunni Shia in Iraq. They're co-religionists in Iraq, and so they got help from the bigger power into the north. So even that was in response to what we were doing to killing their people. Do you see the pattern here, friend? The only time Iran has attacked or done anything nefarious to our interest or our allies' interest is after we have attacked them. And now then, this is the biggest one on display yet. In all the 47 years, this is by far the biggest, huge, most enormous mistake that we've made, self-inflicted mistake. The facts are right there on the ground. It's nearly impossible to ignore, but not impossible. I said nearly impossible. Former Speaker of the House, McCarthy, last night went on Fox News and gave a similar message as what Jennings had, but he went a little bit further about what we can't do for the future.
If you look at for the long term, history-wise, President Trump is going to be praised for this, because I don't think any other president would do it before or into the future. And it's changed geopolitics. If Iran was able to have a nuclear weapon, there would be 40 countries then, because everybody would have one and the world would be unsafe. If you look at the rise of not just China, but the crinks, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. China needs 11 million barrels of oil every single day. They get a large portion from Russia, but a bigger portion from Iran. Even with the sanctions, they get a discount, and Venezuela. So this is reshaping the world and actually making it safer. Domestic politics. People will get upset the price of oil is up, but will it sustain that? I don't believe so. The worst thing we could do is leave this before the job is done.
The worst thing we could do is leave before the job is done. What if the job can't be done, Mr. McCarthy? What then? What if you have embarked upon a military operation, a war that you can't sustain, that you can't keep. He said that price of oil is up, but will it sustain? He says, I don't think so. Well, what if you're wrong? What if what you thought turns out not to be the case? Because those things are inextricably connected. If you don't attain your military objectives, then that price of oil is not going to come down, because now, whether you want it to or not, one of your, in fact, I would say the primary objective right now is opening the Strait of Hormuz to get that oil back free flowing again. That's going to take some time. And so far, that process hasn't even started, because the Iranians are in full control of it. Ergo, you're not going to achieve any of your other goals, and the price of oil is not going to come down. So how long is that going to go? Then he says again, you don't want to, get weak in the knees and quit before it's over. But if you cannot attain that, then to continue on is to even deepen your own harm based upon your foolish choices. So at some point, we're going to have to say, okay, this just isn't working. That point should have already been met. After the first few days, it became clear that you did not have regime change, and that just a minuscule look, just a momentary look at the geography, at the history, at the culture, at the military capacity of Iran, what the difficulty of attaining the goals that we had based on the forces that we had arrayed, and without a ground component, as I've been telling you for months before this war started, without a ground component, you don't even have the theoretical possibility, without just an absolute roll of the dice hope that the first shots destroyed the regime and made them fall. And when that didn't happen, then okay, now then it's back to reality again. And because you don't have a ground force, you don't even have that threat. So all they have to do is stay in their offices, in their bunkers, wherever they're having operations from. And of course, this country is so big, they can endure a lot. It bears repeating again. Look at Gaza Strip. There's many evidences I could provide, but look at the Gaza Strip. This small little enclave, completely surrounded with no air force, no drones, no intelligence services, none of the things of the state of war. Really, all they have in the modern warfare is rifles. That's about it. A few rocket launchers, maybe. They lost those early in the war. A few grenade launchers, maybe. That's about it. That's all they have. And yet, they have not been defeated. No matter what the Israeli Defense Forces and the United States provided weapons have provided, they still couldn't bring them to heel. 25 miles by 7, I think, 5 or 6 or 7. And that's it. And they couldn't defeat them. 2.5 years so far. And they still couldn't defeat them. And now, why do you think that when they didn't capitulate, that the Iranian nation, which is 4 times larger than Iraq and much greater capabilities and open borders, so they're not hemmed in, they can get stuff from outside, they can continue to support themselves by whatever means. Why do you think that you're going to succeed there? Why have you gambled everything on succeeding there? And now you've got to get it done quickly. Well, let's look now at the central part of the decision-making part in the United States. If those are some of the president's allies, what is the president himself saying? And one of the questions he was asked yesterday, which is a big problem for a number of reasons, he was asked about this whole issue of, is this an excursion? Because at some point he's called this an excursion. Another point he called it a war. So he was asked about that last night.
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both. It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war, and the war is going to be. For them it's a war. For us, it's turned out to be easier than we thought. But think of it, they had thousands of missiles, 8,000 missiles. We got many of them before they got to launch. They have drones all over the place. We got many now. We're knocking out the drone plants, as you know, going fast. They started talking about mines, so we hit 28 mine ships as of this moment, 28.
Okay. That right there is illustrative of a bigger problem, in that President Trump doesn't even know what he's doing. He may know a lot about real estate. He definitely knows a lot about talking on camera. He knows a lot about marketing. Exceptionally good. He knows how to manipulate markets. He knows how to manipulate public attention, public opinion. He's really good at it.
He knows a lot about dancing, Danny.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure that one's very helpful here, but yeah, that's one of his skills. But the point being here is that he doesn't know what he's doing about military stuff. So whatever someone says in his ear, that's all he knows. And his own instincts can only go so far. If he acts on some of them earlier on about staying out of war, we'd have been in great shape, what he campaigned on. But somehow he was talked out of that because he inherently doesn't know what he's doing here. And then on that soundbite we just showed you there, he's saying, well, it's an excursion. What does that even mean in military terms? What is an excursion? And he says, well, then he also says it's a war. And then he says, well, it was an excursion to stop a war. I mean, that's obviously as nonsensical as it gets. What do you mean an excursion to stop a war? It's a war. No one with two eyes and a brain can say anything besides it's obviously a war. All this stuff I've showed you just from the last 24 hours, it's a war everywhere. It's a war in the sky. It's a war in the oceans. It's a war on the land. It's a war. So what's the plan to get it done, to get it resolved? I mean, if he doesn't even know what he's in and then says it's a war to stop a war, I don't have an answer for that one. I can't even give you a guess on what he means by that, other than he's just, in his mind, he's just grabbing for anything to say because he knows what he's saying doesn't make sense. And so it keeps going on. One other thing he said last night out in front of, on the outside, I think before he went into one of his events, he was specifically asked about the Strait of Hormuz because he recognizes that's a big deal. Watch this one.
Well, we're going to be in very good shape. You see what's happening. They are pretty much at the end of the line. Doesn't mean we're going to end it immediately, but they've got no Navy, they've got no Air Force, they've got no anti-air traffic, anything. They have no systems of control. We're just riding free range over that country. And now we're going to look very strongly at the Straits. The Straits are in great shape. We've knocked out all of their boats. They have some missiles, but not very many. I think we're in very good shape.
We're in great shape in the Gulf? I mean, what is he talking? Listen, we showed yesterday. I don't think we have that one. Well, we need to pull it up. We showed you the commander of CENTCOM yesterday, the Commander Cooper, General Cooper, talking about all the Navy we hit. He showed a bunch of scenes, and there was just image after image of blowing up a lot of the ships, a lot of the boats. I think Gary's shown you some of the clips that CENTCOM released on that. And so, true enough, we have destroyed a great many boats. I don't remember the exact number, 37. I think I heard them. Don't hold me to that one. But it's a lot. Nearly anything that can be seen on the surface can be blown up. And so apparently President Trump was shown those videos, told about them. And so in his mind, well, they can't mine the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy's gone, so it's not an issue. Well, as Gary's been showing you several times before, new video footage released by the Iranians, the IRGC, shows that they have a whole underground bunkers filled with speedboats. These things can be used at a time of their choosing. When they're ready to launch them, if they have a need, they can open up the gates, the doors, wherever they have them, and they can roll those things out and they can get into the sea. We've already seen some of them take some action, and that's apparently some of the unmanned boats are what caused some of the damage last night. So even though you took out the classic, I think they called them a drone carrier, some of these big combatant ships, those things were easy targets. They were always going to be destroyed, and they were. But Iran has now modernized. They saw some of the things that the Ukraine side did to push back the Russian Navy. Remember that. Remember how we were mocking the Russian Navy, the Black Sea Fleet, about how they had to leave Sevastopol and move further back in the Black Sea because of naval drones and everything else that the Ukraine side was using. Well, guess who else is using naval drones? The Iranians, and to great effect, as we saw last night. That's only going to continue on. So how are you going to knock all those out? Where are they? Do you even know? Of course, a lot of them are going to be underground as well. So you haven't destroyed their naval capacity, even if you destroyed their big ships. There's the one right there I'm talking about. You see, there's just corridors, long lines of ships. So who knows how many they have? We don't know, but they have a lot, and they demonstrated them last night. So the Strait of Hormuz is not in great shape. Moreover, you haven't seen the United States come in and try to force it open, because they know that it would be suicide. See, these are some of the speedboats. That's what they can do. Little boats, and you say, oh, that's not a big deal. But yet they can fire these anti-ship missiles that can do a lot of damage if they get through defenses. We don't want to find out. And that's probably some of the things that led to, could have anyway been, what happened to some of these ships that Gary showed you at the opening of the show. And Gary, if you can pull up that one of the couple of things here, let's show that graphic about the Gulf so you can kind of get an idea of where where all these problems are and the difficulty for the U.S. Navy. That's the one. Thank you, Gary. So you see those are some of the places where some of these ships have been blown up, and you see some are right in that strait, some are on the other side in the Persian Gulf area. Lots of ship that periodically Gary shows you that graphic that shows where all the ships are in the sea, in both the Persian Gulf and on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. And you see that there are all kinds of problems in there, and these ships are just wondering, are we going to get hit today? Because you have no defense. I mean, these are civilian vessels. They don't have any defense. So they're sitting ducks. And if anybody wants to attack them, there's nothing they can do to stop it. They can't get through and they can't leave unless you have the approval of the IRGC. And apparently, according to the Wall Street Journal yesterday, the Iranians in this 12-day war, up to the 12th day when it was produced yesterday, they've actually gotten more oil out than they did before. It's hard to imagine that they did, but because they're in control of it, and it hasn't been mined. A mine will shut it off from any traffic. That's like their final solution. That's like if everything goes to pot, they can mine the thing with a number. They can even do some distance mining, they call it, where they have basically, it's kind of like a rocket will go and have an event, warhead event over the water, and disperse mines out that way. They have submarines apparently that can do some, and they still have some surface vessels that can do it in an emergency. So there's plenty of ways they can do that, but they haven't so far because they want to keep it open because they want somebody who's aligned with them. There have been reports of some Chinese vessels that have gone through, etc. So they control it, but they haven't physically cut it off. And we have not been able to force the thing open. Now, one of the other things some people are saying is, hey, how's about this? What if we get the U.S. Marine Corps to go in and take that island? Here, if you can put that one up there, this is what's being floated around now. There's a couple of different possibilities. One's called Karg Island. I'll talk about that separately. But this is one here where it says, hey, the Marines could take these three sparsely populated islands. Once established, they could move on to Kishim and then put pressure on Bandar Abbas, which is the heart of the Strait of Hormuz. There's no need to occupy all of Iran. So you don't have to have this big thing where you're going to go in and, have a Desert Storm or Operation Iraqi Freedom Part 2 or some version. You don't have to go in with hundreds of thousands. They say you can just go in and take these little 3 islands here, and that'll solve the problem. Well, let me show you why that is a problem. Because if you look at the Gulf itself and not just that little picture that focuses right on the front of it, you'll find out that, okay, there's a problem just getting into this. Okay, so here's the 3 islands they're talking about, these little ones right here. And that, of course, is when you zoom back in, you can see that that's at the choke point of where some of these attacks have been going on. We showed you this some here, and here overnight. So the idea is, well, let's just take these and then we can control the Gulf right there. Well, number one, no, that's not going to do it. Just having these 3 islands alone, let's for the moment just say you were able to successfully get them. Okay, that keeps this part of the traffic open. What about over here? What about over here? What about over here? What about this island? What about that island? You see what I'm saying here? What about these? If you don't own any of this, if you don't control any of this, if you don't even control this bigger island here, because they're just talking about these 3 little ones, what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about any artillery batteries, any rocket batteries, any rockets that come out of the mountains and the hills in these areas around out here? You see that it's so foolish. And yet these people are actually saying, yeah, this is a great idea. But then how would you even get there? Because in order to get there, you're either going to have to airlift them in, which means you don't have heavy equipment. You can all you can do is helicopter them in or parachute them in. It's not like there's any landing strips that you can use that you can have on these islands. If you can see, let's just zoom in here. There's no island. There's no airport here. Maybe you could try in some sort of a fixed airstrip on one of these roads or something like that. But that's right in range of the Iranian side, and they could just pummel anything you have there. Are you going to land like a C-17 or C-130 transport aircraft on something like this? Probably not a C-17. You'd have to have a bigger airstrip. Maybe a C-135. Maybe you can get something small, C-130, I'm sorry. Maybe you can get something small like that theoretically, but it's so vulnerable. You could get it shot down so easily, even with ground fire. So there's no real practical way to get them in by air. And then, okay, well, then you'd have to come through the strait yourself, which is what the Iranians, the IRGC has been taunting us to do. They say, bring it on. Bring on your Navy. I want to see you go through this area here, because let's look, see how far back this is. This is the Gulf of Oman, and our ships reportedly, from what I've been able to get from open sources, we're about 1,000 miles off the shore here, because this is where there's also lots of batteries. So I was even talking about these three up here, but you can see even back in this area here, I mean, this is all Iran, folks. They can, any ship that starts approaching here, we have no earthly idea in this whole huge hundreds of kilometer stretches here of places where they could have artillery batteries, rocket launchers, cruise missiles, any number of different ways that they can attack here just to get in. There's a reason why they were this far out, to get out of standoff range. To get to these three islands with the naval vessels where you could unload stuff, you've got to go through this whole gauntlet. And then through the strait right here. Do you realize, I mean, you see really quickly just how absurd this is, that that's even an idea. And what all this tells you is that there really isn't any kind of militarily attainable mission that you could give them. There are some theoretical things you could do, but there is nothing that's militarily attainable at a cost and at a time frame that you can afford. We have gotten ourselves into something right now to where this whole conflict right now really comes down to, can the Iranian government maintain solvency? And therefore, by extension, can the IRGC remain solvent? And can they remain, and ultimately, can that little triumvirate right there keep control of the Strait of Hormuz? Control. They decide who comes in and out. And if somebody they don't want comes out, it gets blown up in the sea. And of course, just even these handful of ships that were blown up last night and the others that came before that is enough to make sure that no other company is going to risk anything by trying to force that through there, especially without a military escort. Well, no nation wants to be escorted, because that puts a big target on them from the Iranians. It almost guarantees that they're going to shoot at you. So nobody wants that either, because they understand that there's no physical military prospect that being escorted by a ship, that ship could protect them. The ship might not be able to protect itself. And listen, I don't think this has been lost on our Navy. When you see how our air defense capacity has performed at every one of these bases, 17 American bases and other sites in the Middle East have been hit, not attacked, but hit. And that means that our missile defense capacity is operating, I mean, if you want to be generous in some categories, maybe 20, 25%. And it might not even be that high. Some have suggested it's as low as 5%. Ted Postal on our show suggested it could be 5%. Well, if that's our land-based stuff, I promise you there's not some magic different technology on a ship that's going to be substantially higher. It's probably also going to be around that same percentage. Let's go generous and say it's 25%. What that tells the Iranians, and I think the reason why they're licking their chops and saying, please bring your Navy in, is because they realize it's a numbers game then. We'll throw 100 missiles at the first ship that comes through there. And if you're really great and 25% of them get knocked down, that means 75% are going to strike their targets. And that image that Gary showed at the beginning of this massive burning ship, that's a tanker, and that gets your attention. If that was an American warship, just imagine this, what you're seeing right there. Imagine if instead of a tanker, that is an aircraft carrier, or that is a frigate, or that is any American warship at all that's going up like that. That would be catastrophic for our impression, our image around the world. Because most people have not tested us because they believe we have this near impervious capacity, because that's what we claim, to what President Trump says on a nearly daily basis. But if we move into the Gulf and prove that's not true, then that means our entire Navy is at risk. And it is, by the way, whether it's acknowledged or not. That's the reason why the powerful Russian Navy had to move from Sevastopol back, because they were at risk on that. The modern warfare right now, I've been saying this for a long time, for years. The new technology with drones, naval drones, underwater drones, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned, but the Iranians have also announced that they have undersea missiles, they call them. It's kind of like a really modern torpedo that apparently can travel up to 100, and in one case claimed anyway, 300 meters per second. So it's a very, very fast torpedo that virtually has no defense against it, at least nothing in the current arsenal. So that could also hit it. That's from undersea, much less on top of it. But right now, the undersea, the air power and the naval drones have changed the nature of surface warfare. So the naval warfare, you're not going to see another fight like you did in World War II, where we had these big battles, the Gulf of Layat or Midway or anything like that, where you have all these surface vessels. Those days, I think, are over, because you're never going to get there, because missiles will take them out long before that. When you get into a situation where fleets are starting to move together, it's going to be not jets, not even like in the Battle of Midway, where it was aircraft carriers with planes coming in. Now it's just missiles, and they can be done from such a great distance that it renders them virtually useless. That's why you haven't seen, with all of this third of our naval power, why they're still about 1,000 miles off the coast, while they still haven't moved to shut this down, even though, yeah, that's it right there. Thanks, Gary. That's why you have not seen us attempt it, because the naval officers, I'm sure of it, are telling the president, if we go in there, it's going to be one of our ships. You have video like that, and that will devastate our reputation around the world. So we're not going to go in and do that. That's why he hasn't given that order. So what does that tell you? Where are we then in this war? Despite what Scott Jennings says, or what Mike McCarthy says, or any of these other guys, Lindsey Graham, Jack Keane, et al., all these people. That's we all know what that is. That's from Bush's premature declaration of mission accomplishment. And of course, that's what President Trump just said last night. We showed you a video of that. I called it his epic fail from Operation Epic Fury, where he said, we've won. That's how we started this show off here. That's the same kind of thing that was involved here. That's where we are here. And it's now being obvious to everybody that we're not going to win this militarily. So now then we have to get, Gary, if you can put that one from the Pezeshkian back up again, the Iranian president. This is where we are right now, folks. They have the upper hand because they have control of the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, they have control of our economic lifeblood with a knife to our throat by keeping the Gulf closed. And they're saying the only way to end this war, ignited by the U.S., is recognizing Iran's legitimate rights, payment of reparations, and firm international guarantees against the future. And by that, I'm sure he means Russia, China, Pakistan, and a number of others possibly that are going to have to guarantee that. So that is by itself diplomatically going to be enormously difficult and time-consuming. You know, in this whole issue of paying reparations, obviously nobody wants to do that. The only time you pay reparations is when you've lost a war, like Germany did in World War I, to where you can have to pay reparations, and you've got to agree to it. Otherwise, the war continues on. And obviously, can't even imagine President Trump being 100 miles from even contemplating something like that, which tells you that the war will go on unless we can find some way to, with missile power and air power, to destroy so much in Iran that somehow they're going to sue for peace. That's the only path, short of doing any version of what President Pezeshkian there says and what he's asking for. The reason why they're asking for the moon right now is because they know he's cocky, and they're in a confident position because they know that the requirement for us to break the impasse in the Gulf is to get the Hormuz open by our Navy. And they know, and they mean it when they say this, I promise you. They saw what the Ukrainians without a Navy did to the Russian Navy. So they're saying, bring it on, man. And they mean it because they know they have the capacity to turn it into flames, because they know that our air defense systems on those ships is probably the same as the one on the land. It's not magic. And there's a reason we know that too. That's why we haven't done it. So where does that leave us then? It leaves us claiming we're having success, claiming that we're winning, claiming that the Hormuz is not a problem. But that's just buying time in like a few days, because the clock is ticking. The strategy, the number of the dollar figures anyway, they're going up. What is the current price right now? I don't have it in front of me. I thought I did. Oh, here it is right here. What is the current price? It's has it changed any since we were on? It's currently at still the same, $95. That's going to continue to go up though. So we're going to continue to see that price of oil go up. We're going to continue to see that Iranian knife at our neck. And they're saying, we're not going to move it until you do what we asked for. So we are now in a position, because of a war of choice, that we can't quickly get out of, and that we can't get out of at all without a significant price being paid. Because if you want to try to force it, if I said the only way is making the Iranian government, capitulate because you bombed them, I don't think we have enough bombs to do that. They're mentally prepared. They're physically prepared to endure a lot more bombardment in a country that is so big, that has so many natural defenses and the ability to endure that much bomb. I don't think we have enough. But if they tried anyway, that clock keeps ticking, and that price will keep going up. And the longer it becomes evident that we can't open it up, then the less confidence people are going to have in the United States, and the more rapid that number is going to go up. That's where we are right now. That's how serious this is, folks. Well, we'll keep on being on top of this for you. We have at I believe it's 1 o'clock. Sorry, we have Colonel Jacques Beau, who's going to come and give us. There's a lot going on diplomatically too around the corner. I haven't touched on any of those because we have Colonel Beau, who's so good at this and has so much understanding about all these, especially as it relates to Russia, China, in the diplomatic areas, and what else is going on in Europe, because this also has ramifications for them as well, as he's going to see. Tune in today at 1 o'clock. Colonel Jacques Beau on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We'll see you then. We don't have sponsors because we hate to hit you over the head with ads. I don't like them. So show a little love back. Subscribe, like, and send this to somebody you care about.